All right, so I'm here with comics legend Al Milgrom.
Legend, mind you.
Legend. Well, you know, you've worked with Marvel for so long. You had a 10-year run as the editor of Marvel Fanfare, right? Was it
Yes.
Fanfare?
No. That's.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a
Marvel
bi-monthly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yes, I did have that.
Yeah. And you worked very closely with Jim Starlin for a long time.
Jim and I met in middle school in Michigan. My friends all knew that I liked comics. I drew comics, tried to draw comics. And one of my acquaintances said, you know, there's another guy who draws stuff like you.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, who could he be? And he introduced me to Jim, and his drawing was way better than mine. And we became very friendly, but I learned Jim hung with a different crowd. Jim was in with the tough guys. They would have been greasers if it was the movie Grease.
Right.
And I was, I guess, a frat is what they called them in those days, greasers and frats. Not that I was in a fraternity, but you know, I was less likely to get into trouble than Jim and his cronies.
Right.
But we both loved comic books, and at the time we were heavy into Marvel. And I used to run up to him in school. I said, Jim, did you see the latest issue of the Fantastic Four? And he went, me at home. And I said, what? I said, you know, because I had no compunctions about discussing comic books in public, nerd that I was.
Right.
But Jim said, you know, my friends will beat the shit out of me if they find out I read comic books. I said, really? Oh. Sorry to hear that. And it's true. He was about the smallest of the crowd he hung out with. These were big, tough, punch you in the face kind of guys. A lot of them. I'm sure they were nice people in their own right.
Right. Sure.
But anyway, so Jim and I, but we not by any stretch. And so we became very friendly, you know, but not in public. And that sounds vaguely obscene, but it wasn't. And you know, we used to read comics, and we talk about them, we draw them. And early on, I knew I was in trouble because I would sit there, I would do a drawing. I'd do maybe a half a page of continuity. Jim was banging out 20-page stories. He had the ideas in his head. He thought nothing of sitting down to an entire issue of a comic book on his own. And I said, this guy's so much better than me and so much more productive and fast and just good. I'll just ink his stuff. So I had been, you know, inking my own stuff, so I started inking his stuff. And I was aware of fanzines, which, you know, were amateur comic books being produced. Some of them were articles about comics, but some of them were actually original comic book material. In particular, I remember there was a group called the Texas Trio, and they published a number of different fanzines featuring original characters. Right. And I put Jim in touch with them, and he started doing a bunch of stuff for them, and some of which I inked, and some of which I did not. But anyway, that's how we got to know each other. So yeah, I knew Jim. I knew him when. Yeah. And I actually still have some pages he drew then. This was in high school by now. Of Thanos that he had. Oh, really? Because yes, he had developed the character before he ever got into the business. Yeah. In fact, I believe. Well, I had a couple pages, like it was an Iron Man story that he had done, where Thanos comes to Earth and you know, wants Tony Stark to do something for him. Right. But I think Jim, he at one point was doing samples for Lois Lane, and I think. I don't remember I don't think he used Thanos in that. He may have been using Darkseid, because at the time, you know, it was the early 70s. Kirby was working for DC. Yeah, he was doing his fourth book. And he had, all his original stuff plus the Jimmy Olsen book. Yeah. So Starlin thought, well, the Jimmy Olsen book just got a hell of a facelift. Maybe I could do the same thing for Lois Lane. Yeah. So I remember he had done some sample pages for Lois.
And what did you start working on when you got it?
Well, after I went to college after high school, Jim went into the Navy. So we both had, you know, about a 4-year stretch in our various, you know, areas. And when I first moved to Jim mustered out before I graduated. So he had already moved to New York, and he had gotten some work up at Marvel, I remember he was doing some cover sketches for people. He was laying out some stuff for John Romita, because John, well, although he was a perfectly brilliant cartoonist, sometimes he had trouble like just knuckling down and getting started. So somebody putting something on the page for him would just get him over the hump,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Starlin had no trouble laying stuff out. So. And I graduated from the art school at the University of Michigan, which is where we were both from originally. And I came out, and I couldn't get work right away, but I showed my stuff around. And at DC, Carmine Infantino was the editor-in-chief at the time. Excuse me. He thought I had some promise, and he called Murphy Anderson into his office. Murphy was a great, at the time he was in his 40s. So he'd been around since the, late 40s. Did comics, did the Buck Rogers newspaper strip. And at DC at that current time, he was inking a lot of the Superman stuff over Kurt Swan and other stuff as well. And he had been doing the Atomic Knights for one of the science fiction books, and beautiful stuff, just very beautifully drawn. Now, I was a Kirby fanatic because I love that action-packed, but nobody can do that like Kirby. And Murphy was very, much more of a draftsman, solid, in the DC sort of style, where the drawing may have been technically better, but as far as I was concerned, you couldn't beat Kirby and Ditko and some of the other guys that Stan had working for him at Marvel. But Murphy, was used background people to help with the inks, and he deemed me competent enough to do that. And so my first day, I remember the first day I went into the office. Murphy used to live in Jersey, but he'd commute in every day and sit down at a drawing board in the sort of the DC bullpen, and he would work. And I asked him why, because to my knowledge, freelancers usually work at home. And he said, "Alan, my wife doesn't drive, and if I'm home, she figures I'm not really working." So he said, in order to convince her that I'm working, I have to go into an office somewhere and sit down. And Murphy would come in, he'd be wearing like a suit and a tie, and he had an attaché case, and in the attaché case were pens and brushes and India ink and straight edges and, and like 15 or 20 Superman pages.
That's
and I just thought it was so funny because he had, he wanted to look the part of a legitimate businessman. And meanwhile, it's like Brainiac is threatening the planet. I've got to ink these pages and get that stuff done. So I thought that was great. And he said, "Well, Alan, when you go, I would carry a portfolio around me. So they used to give me free comics. I'd throw them in there." He says, "Do you read those in public? Like on the subway?"
So funny.
I said, "Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Why wouldn't you?" He said, "Oh no, I would never. I would be embarrassed." I said, "Murphy, you're a terrific cartoonist. You should be proud of the work you do. You shouldn't be hiding it." But generational thing.
Now, you once lived in the same Queens building as Bernie Wrightson, Walt Simonson. Hold on a second. My memory is bad.
Alan Kupperberg.
Howard Chaykin.
Right. Elliot S. Magan.
Yep.
Did we say Roger Stern?
No. Didn't have
Roger
Stern on there. Yeah.
Did we say? Yeah. What happened was I lived there first. Or maybe it was Magan. When I first moved out to New York, I moved to Staten Island because that's where Starlin was living.
That's where we're from.
Okay. I lived on just off Victory Boulevard.
Okay.
I got on a bus, and I go down, and there was a diner, Tina's Diner, home of the Tina Burger.
Nice.
Very nice. Good burger. And right around the corner from that diner, and it was near, there's a mental hospital, isn't there, right there?
There was.
They closed it down.
Yeah.
It was about 2 or 3 blocks away. I figured easy access for a cartoonist. So, but Jim was living in a converted area over a guy's garage where he had made 4 bedrooms and Starlin was living there. Steve Skates, the writer, was living there. Bill Dubay, the editor of Warren magazines, was living there, and Starlin.
Yeah.
No, wait, my Starlin, yeah, and Mike Friedrich. Mike Friedrich was the other one. Mike had moved out from California, didn't like the East Coast, thought he was established enough he could go back home and work through the mails.
Right.
And so when I graduated college, Jim said, we got a spot, come on out. So I packed some stuff and came out, and moved in with him.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because the commute was insane. I had to take the bus to the Staten Island ferry. Then I had to take the ferry. Which was a nickel at the time.
Yeah.
That was the best deal in anywhere possible. You could take this real nice ferry ride. You'd go by the Statue of Liberty, and then you'd get off in the Staten Island ferry area where they had some very good soft serve ice cream, I remember. And then I'd get on a subway, and I'd take the subway uptown till I got to 63rd Street and 3rd Avenue, where DC was located at the time. So I'm taking trains, I'm taking buses, taking boats.
That's all of us when we want to go to Manhattan.
I don't know how I missed out on a flight, but I guess it was too short a distance to book a plane. And I'd get there and so I could get paid $5 a page for inking backgrounds for Murphy Anderson.
Nice. Yeah, I actually had the good fortune of meeting the Simonsons at a convention about 5 years ago.
Sure.
They are about the nicest people I've ever met in person.
Yes, they
are. I could not believe how nice they were. And you worked for a while as an inker on X Factor, right?
I did, yes.
Was that when Louise Simonson was writing it?
Yeah. She and Walt did a fairly brief stint, I think, on the book. Wyacek had been inking it. And there was one issue where Bob fell behind, which is not unusual in the business, in our era, at least. And they said, Al, can you ink, half an issue of X Factor? I said, sure. And they said, Al, can you ink the next issue? I said, sure. And then I did it for the next 8 years over a revolving door of dozens of pencilers. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
No, there was a lot of people who worked on that book.
A lot of people,
again.
Yeah. And so Walt and I had been roommates. We were actually roommates in that apartment building in Queens. And he met Wheezy, and I had a good history. When I lived with Megan, he moved out to move in with a girlfriend, and then Walt moved in with me because we struck it off, and then after a while he moved out to move in with Wheezy. So I was, I should have opened a dating service instead. I would have done better, especially in the comics crowd. So,
and you worked at Warren too, right?
I did some work for them. I never worked at the office. But I did a little bit of inking and writing for them.
Right. For either Creepy or Eerie. Or was it Vampirella?
No, I don't think I did any for Vampirella, but Creepy and Eerie I did some. I inked some Carmine Infantino. I think that's the first time I ever inked Carmine was when he was no longer head of DC, and he was back to freelancing. And he was doing, for a while there, he was doing a lot of work for Warren. And Carmine was one of those guys whose work I just adored growing up. And it was a thrill to get to ink him, and I think I did a pretty good job on him, and Walt inked him, and that was interesting because Carmine had been one of the ones, responsible for hiring Walt at DC, and he could see the genius there. He knew right away Walt was something special, and it's funny that Walt's inking really meshed pretty well with Carmine's sense of design and so on. But Carmine was, his stuff was adaptable. I mean, Murphy used to ink him, and you'd think the two of them were diametrically opposed because Carmine's stuff was very loose and sketchy and almost like gesture drawing sort of approach, and Murphy's was very solid and stolid and technical and very well carefully rendered and stuff, but somehow the combination worked. And then Walter on Carmine was great too, but a lot of guys got to ink Carmine later at Warren and also at Marvel when he started doing work for Marvel. So
do you have a preference, penciling or inking? Do you?
I really enjoy them both. I mean, penciling is more creative.
Yeah.
But I like trying to match my inking to different penciler styles, and I call myself a inking chameleon. Not that I ink anything with my tail, but maybe I should. But it just, I think my style. Shooter used to say, "Did you ink this?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "It doesn't look like your stuff." I said, "Sure it does."
Yeah.
Because my stuff didn't look like, it didn't look the same, depending on who the penciler was.
So that was going to be another of my questions. If you have a style of your own,
Yeah.
and then you're inking somebody else's style, do
Yeah.
you sort of meld your styles, or is it you adopt to their style?
I mostly tried to adapt to their styles. With mixed success, but that was my goal. And most inkers will say that. But then, you've got guys like Joe Rubenstein or Terry Austin or Joe Sinnott or Frank Giacoy or Bob Wycheck, and they, I think their stuff, for the most part, is very distinctive, no matter who they ink. And I think the difference is my stuff is not distinctive, no matter who I ink. Because I really adapt to the penciler's approach, or try to.
Right.
And I had a number of times where people, Larry Stroman,
Heard the name.
he did a run on X Factor because everybody had to.
Yeah, I was going to say so many pencils. I was a big fan of that book.
Thank you.
And it just the pencils they kept switching pencils over and over again. Especially the writing that Louise Simonson did.
Yeah. But then Peter David did it for a while.
Yeah.
It really had a revolving door of talent, except for me. I was stuck there.
The only full
And going around and around in that revolving door. But in a way, as an inker, I found it, refreshing, because I never felt like I was stuck inking the same guy month after month, year after year. It was fresh. Okay, this guy did 6 issues. Who's next? And it wasn't that I was throwing anybody off, but they would move on to other projects and they'd find somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I got the litany. Walt did it. Art Adams did a few issues. I did an issue over Rob Liefeld. I did an issue over Mark Silvestri. I did an issue over one of the Kubert brothers. I think Andy, or was it Adam? I think it was Andy. Jan Dersma did a bunch of issues. There was a guy who did a bunch of issues, and I'm having a senior moment forgetting his name. When it became Factor X for a while instead of X Factor.
Oh yeah, that was the early 2000s.
Probably, yeah. I'm blanking on the guy's name. He's a terrific artist.
Is that the guy who did Madman, right? What's his name? Allred?
No. Him I never inked.
Oh, okay.
No. I can't think of it. Oh well, it'll come to me later when it's too late.
What about?
I'll edit it in there. I'll edit it in.
Yeah. What about Firestorm?
And also some of the West Coast guys. What's his name? No, I'm not going to remember them either. Oh well.
Now you co-created the Ronnie Raymond version of Firestorm.
Yes, I did. Yeah, with Jerry Conway at DC. I had a very brief stint at DC. I literally 1 year from. Almost to the day. They hired me. Jeanette Kahn had hired me to do covers first at Neil Adams' behest, because Neil had seen I had been doing cover sketches for Jack Kirby at Marvel at Jerry Conway's behest. But I've been doing a lot of covers at Marvel. And Jerry said, instead of shipping all the photocopies out to the West Coast and having Kirby wasted time, going through them to find a cover scene, how would you like to do cover sketches for Jack Kirby? And I said, I'm not worthy. But I said I'd love to. And I said, on one condition, I want to ink the covers that he pencils based on my cover sketches. And he said, yeah, I have no problem with that. So I did a bunch of Kirby covers for a fairly short period of time. Avengers, Defenders, Iron Man, and Ghost Rider. So that was fun. And to my surprise and delight, Kirby did not change my cover sketches hardly at all. But I put on my Jack Kirby hat, and he was a big influence on me. So I said, I'm going to make these as Kirby-esque as possible. And they came back looking virtually like I mean, it was Jack Kirby, but they were my sketches.
Yeah.
And then years later, I never got any of the originals. But then sometime later, we went to the San Diego Con. Shooter took the entire Marvel staff, and there at a table run by the Kirby clan was a bunch of these covers for sale. And I went over and I said, "Ooh, I want to buy these." I inked them, and the person at the table, who I guess is one of his sons, said, "Oh, you're the inker?" I said, "Yeah, I never got any of the originals back, so I really, was so, thrilled to do them over Jack's stuff." And he says, "Well," and I think they were $100 each, which was not nothing at the time. I mean, but it was for a Jack Kirby cover.
Yeah.
So he said, "Wait here a minute," and he ran off, left the table. Anybody could have run off with all the Jack Kirby artwork they wanted. But nobody did. And but he came back. He says, "Yeah, I checked with my dad." He says, "You can have them for $60 each." So I bought as many as they had of mine. Yeah. So and I still have them. So.
And what do you have to promote now? What do you work on?
Not a damn thing. I wish I did. Yeah. I'm not working. I'm not upset about it.
Right.
Because frankly, now on the rare occasion when I get a job, I don't want to do it. I have a hard time sitting down at the board. I got a bad case of, writer's block, but for an artist.
Right.
I'd rather be, I do commissions.
Yeah, that's this is great. This black hat is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice of you to say so.
No,
I just whipped this out. As Cleavon Little said in Blazing Saddles. Let me just whip this thing out. And so I did that here today, and people can reach me if they have any desire to get a commission at the following email address. It's editorial, that's EDITORIAL, one word, 4, the numeral, not spelled out, editorial4 at AOL.com. And if you contact me, put in the subject line, I want a commission, or do me a drawing, or whatever. Right. And then I will answer you and not suspect it's spam.
And what's your next show? Where are you appearing next?
God forbid.
Where are you appearing next?
I will be appearing at my dinner table later tonight. No, I'm going to be at the Heroes Con in North Carolina, and I think that's mid-June. I hope I got the date right. I'm going to be doing the TerrificCon in...
That's July. I'll be there.
July. Is that mid or end of July?
It's the end of July.
End of July, TerrificCon at the Mohegan Sun Casino. It's these are both wonderful shows, very good shows, well run, good hosts, yada yada yada. I'm doing another one. Oh, I know. In the beginning of July, 1st and 2nd, there's a show in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Never done it before, and I was trying to arrange to get my grandkids to come, after the show so we could do Hershey Park, which I took my kids to when they were young. And I remember it was fun and lots of chocolate. And so that's the show I'll be doing. And I'm doing another one, I think, but when? That's all I can think of at the moment. Yeah. Right. I got about 4 or 5 lined up. I just did a real nice one it's a one-day show called the Little Giants Old School Comic Show in New Hampshire. It's a one-day show. It seems to be April, like right around the middle of April every year. This year was April 15th, but luckily my taxes were already done. So, and what else? Oh, and he's thinking of expanding. It's a very good show in Concord, New Hampshire.
That's nice there.
Beautiful little town. Lots of restaurants all up and down Main Street. And I think he's going to expand it soon to a 2-day show, which I've been trying to convince him to do, because you have to schlep up there, and you're there for a day, and you schlep there, so you're there 3 or 4 days as it is. So this way, I hope to get an extra day out of him, but we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you for giving us your time.
Oh,
I really
that's my
appreciate it.
pleasure.
No,
Sure.
thank you so much. It was
All right.
wonderful meeting you.
All right.